Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? Oh. Is that any better?
Still can't hear you.
Panic. I wonder if I leave and come back, if it'll work. It's no, that won't work. Hello.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Christine, yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Good. Right, we'll wait for Kay and Richard, and we'll give it till 4 o'clock. We've got some attendees in the audience signing on. Can you panelists see the participant list and the Q&A function at the bottom?
I can see the Q&A and 9 participants so far.
Yeah, so I shall ask people to put their questions in the Q&A box, and I'll let you and Kay do your presentations, and then we'll take questions from the Q&A box, and then I can invite participants to come on to the microphone and say their bit.
Okay. I'm going to share the slideshow on the obviously share screen, Christine. Okay, and that's for Kay. So I'll be sharing it. I'll do that in a minute.
I have a Boris style next slide, please, kind of thing.
That's exactly what it'll be.
Lovely.
Oh, hello, you, Alex. You could have done it. Sorry, what? To me?
Yes.
No, Kay, it needs to be you.
Okay. I didn't know you were attending.
Yeah, well, Christine invited me, so here I am.
Well, how lovely to see you again so soon.
I know.
Right, we think we've got it organised, don't we, Tracy?
We think so. We've got this share screen in sorted, I think. Well, I hope.
As you will realise, Alex, it's not me doing any of the technical stuff.
Really, Kay? That's amazing.
I've managed to get on is a miracle.
You're giving away your poor IT secrets to Christine, Kay.
Yeah, I could just about cope with Microsoft Teams, but none of the others. So all sorts of things. Jitsi, have you heard of Jitsi? No. Yeah, see, that's one I've used.
Okay.
We'll give it a couple more minutes to give everybody a chance to join till 4 o'clock. So welcome to those of you in the audience. We can't see you and you can see us. So it feels like we're talking to ourselves a little bit. But... So before we begin, and I'll do the introductions to who everybody is and what this forum's all about. I just wanted to say what we'll do is ask you all to put your questions in the Q&A box, which you should find at the bottom of your screen along underneath the pictures of us panelists. We'll save all the questions until the end, until the presenters have said their bits, and we'll come to you and read those questions out loud, and we'll ask you to invite you to come off mute and say the questions yourself. So put them in as you go along, as you think of the questions, and we'll answer them all after the presentations. So it's now 4 o'clock, so I think we'll make a start so that we make the most of the time. So I'm Christine Price, and I'm the Chief Officer at Healthwatch. And Healthwatch organise these school forums once a term. So for the last couple of terms, we've done them digitally because of COVID, and I think we'll be doing them digitally next term as well. So this term, we've got CLD Trust talking to us all about the services that they deliver, and you'll hear more about what they are if you don't already know something about the CLD Trust. They mainly deliver counselling based services and support to young people in Herefordshire in a number of ways, which we'll hear about. So on the panel that you can see in front of you, we've got Kay Berry, who's the Chief Executive of the CLD Trust. We have Tracy Jackson, who's a Senior Counsellor at the CLD Trust. Alex, who is the Business Development Manager. Is that the right title at the moment? I think it is.
That'll do.
Yeah, it'll do. Also the CLD Trust. And joining us on the panel is Richard Kelly, who many of you have met before through the Schools Forum. Richard is our director who takes the lead on mental health at Healthwatch. So without waffling on anymore, please put your questions in the panel as you go along in the Q&A box. And I'll hand over to Kay and Tracy.
Christine, just quickly, it's saying that it won't allow me to use the share screen. Could you?
I'll make sure. Is that changed for you, Tracy? I've just made you a co-host.
That's it. Thank you very much.
You're right, Tracy.
Yeah, I'm just loading it up now. Bear with me.
While Tracy's doing that, then I will just talk a little bit about what we are going to talk about this afternoon. So if you didn't hear me earlier, then I've left all the technical stuff to Tracy because it's not my forte. So good afternoon, everyone. We're going to talk, as Christine has said, a little bit about the CLD Trust services, and we're going to focus also on the work we do in schools and colleges, as that was the request. We should have some slides in a minute. So here we are, I think. Okay, so I'm on slide 2, Tracy. So in brief, we are a registered charity. We work across Herefordshire and the surrounding areas and have been doing so for over 25 years. Some of you may know that last year was our 25th anniversary and we had a celebration at the Courtyard Theatre in Hereford. We are primarily working with children and young people aged 10 to 26, but we don't have an upper age limit. So we do work with people who are older, and you'll see that in a few minutes when I show you a particular slide. Over the last few years, as we have taken on board additional training, we have worked with some young people who are below the age of 10, but this usually occurs when we're working with parent-led sessions or with systemic family practice. Our therapeutic service is a fully qualified service, so we don't use any volunteers and we don't use any trainees as part of that therapeutic service. That service is accredited with the BACP, the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. And we are also a member of NHS England's Southwest Collaborative for Children and Young People's Improving Access to Psychological Therapies programme. Bit of a mouthful, but essentially that is aimed at providing additional skills and training into the children and young people's mental health workforce. We also run an early intervention service, Strong Young Minds, which I'm going to talk about a little later, and participation. So the participation of children and young people who are involved in our service is one of the key areas of our work. Tracy. So just to summarise then, 3 main strands to our work. We offer a range of therapies in our therapeutic service. So we offer counselling, low and high intensity cognitive behavioural therapy, and systemic family practice. And then amongst that, our counselling workforce, we have people with a range of specialisms. So we're able to offer things like bereavement, family work, art therapy, working with addiction. So each of those members of the team have their own specialisms in addition to that expertise with children and young people. We have our early intervention service, strand 2, Strong Young Minds, and our participation work. And the main way that that participation work is delivered is through the Herefordshire Wellbeing Ambassadors and the Strong Young Minds Champions, which again I'll talk to you about. Thanks, Trace. So, Strong Young Minds, what is it? I'm sure a lot of you have already heard of Strong Young Minds. It's been working across the county for, I think we're into our 6th year. It's an early intervention service. It's funding dependent. So we can only run it when we have specific funding for that service. It provides one-to-one support, advocacy, brokerage, advice, information, training and education. It has an element of participation, which is quite a sizable element. So young people are recruited and trained to act as Strong Young Minds champions, and they raise awareness, they reduce the stigma which still surrounds mental ill health, and they educate and support others. To that programme, young people can refer themselves, or we take referrals from professionals, or we accept family member referrals. So just to provide a bit of context for this programme, it was established 6 years ago following the loss of interventions across the county as austerity cuts were imposed, and the number of opportunities for young people to engage with professionals other than teachers and other people were withdrawn. So the idea was that we would support young people whose experiences may, if they were left, impact on their mental health and well-being. So the idea was that we would provide this low-level support, contextual support, do some work around some of those issues which were affecting young people, and then equip them with the skills and knowledge that they need to make those decisions and changes that they need to make. Although we've had some of that low-level referral, in reality, we've had some, I would say the bulk of those referrals have been young people with quite sizable needs. Lots of people with multiple and complex needs who've fallen between organisations for one reason or another, and are seeking, in some cases, more help than we're able to provide through that intervention programme. So we've referred some young people on for that. Participation. Within Strong Young Minds, we have the champions. They're involved in a range of activities, Hay Festival, various campaigns. They've been involved in making films for BBC Teach, in podcasts with that Radio 1 DJ. They're training. They're currently working on an exhibition called Express Yourself, which involves people making artwork, pictures, sculptures, poems, textiles, and submitting those. Those are going to be displayed around Hereford in Young People's Mental Health Week. We also have the Wellbeing Ambassadors. They have a specific role, which is to help improve services. So they're looking at mental health services for children and young people, primarily working with CAMS and the CLD Trust, and looking at what improvements need to be made to those services to equip them to function in the way that the government would like and NHS England would like services to run. Again, they've been involved in a range of projects. They've been to Birmingham to look at a 0 to 25 service. They're currently looking at the transition plan for Herefordshire. And they're also working on a project called The Gap, which is looking at what happens to young people as they transition from CAMS to adult services. So again, all of those young people are very committed to the work that they're doing. Some of them have been around for a considerable time. We've trained over 300 people to act as champions and probably about 50 young people to be ambassadors. So a lot of involvement. We've really done a lot of good work. We've recently been engaged in a much higher social media profile, looking at how we can increase our engagement with young people during lockdown. You may well have seen some of those posts, and again, that's been very well received with a considerable amount of engagement. Thanks, Tracy. So our therapeutic service, we receive over 1,400 referrals a year for this service. It means that we, in addition to our contracts, we are constantly looking for funding to enable us to meet this need because it is significant and it is rising each year. We see a range of presentations. Long since gone have been the single presentations for something, let's say, like anxiety. What we see now are multiple presentations with multiple needs, and in a number of cases we have young people where we are monitoring and safeguarding. We use a range of nationally recognised routine outcome measurements, ROMs. They help the counsellors track progress, and they can be used with the clients directly to show them the progress they're making. And they also provide appropriate data for our reporting. We evaluate our service, so we ask young people to be involved in evaluating the service at 2 points in service. One, after their assessment. This is basically trying to see whether they have understood what's on offer, whether they understand what's required, whether we got it right, whether they felt they'd been heard in that assessment. And then we ask them again at the end of service about that service, and also we ask them to try and identify the difference that the service has made, so what's changed in their life. All of our staff have case management and supervision, so they are regularly meeting with qualified supervisors to ask them about the cases that they're working on, what the goals are, what the progress is, and that enables us to make sure that all clients are making progress. We have 3 quality and professional practice managers, and they are on duty. One of them is on duty every day. We have a shared approach to risk, which means that if any risk is identified from any session with a client, then that member of staff is required to consult with a quality and professional practice manager. This means that we can discuss the risk and share the approach to that risk, and then we can then monitor what's happening to that young person. All our counsellors have a minimum level 5 diploma plus significant experience working with children and young people. And as I said earlier, all of them usually have at least one specialism. Some of them have additional specialisms. Many of our staff have taken advantage of training that's been offered through CYP IAT. The link there is through Exeter University, and we've brought those additional skills into the service. Thanks, Tracy. So the next slide I'm going to show you is just for you. It's not very clear because it's quite small, but it's to give you an idea of the age range and gender of people that we've seen in our service. So this was for our 1920 cohort. As you can see there, male referrals outnumber females between roughly the ages of 8 and 13. And then, as you can see, female referrals shoot up then. And then very low down on the bottom, and this was because we only have a few contracts where we can see older young people, but you can see that male referrals start coming in again in the 20s, so kind of 25 upwards. If we look at trends in the UK in terms of mental health of males and females, this is quite common to see males popping up for some help and support in their 20s, but not necessarily asking for it in their teens. And then on the next slide, that's just a slide showing you the range of presenting issues. So we look at presenting issues twice within the course of therapy. So we look at the presenting issues that are written on the referrals that we receive, the majority of which are from GPs and health professionals. And then we ask the counsellors at the end of counselling to record the primary presentations that they've seen in the counselling room. So as you can see there, we have the kind of presentations that you would expect. So anxiety, stress related, depression, low mood, self-esteem, self-image, but we also see a fair number of other presentations, including self-harm, abuse, young people who are witness to domestic violence, bereavement, eating difficulties, the full range. And we see, as I said earlier, multiple presentations. So young people will appear with 2, 3, or even more sometimes. These are just the primary presentations. So these means that these are the presentations that have been worked on in the counselling room. Tracy. So in the evaluation, we ask young people to identify from a list of statements some of the changes that have been made, and they identify which of those are relevant for them, and they also have the ability to write additional benefits on their evaluation form. So in the year 1920, 53.5% of those completing service filled out an evaluation form. There were, so that was 387 young people who recorded 2,653 positive changes, so an average of 6 per young person. So for those young people who completed their evaluation, there had certainly been considerable change as a result of the intervention. So one of the other things we do is work closely with schools and colleges. Thanks, Tracy. We offer a tailored service for each school. We can help schools and colleges with their development of a whole school approach, and have done that with some of the schools in the county. We can provide a counsellor on site. We can provide support for the students, but also for staff if that's required. We offer training to schools and colleges. We offer supervision, and we're able to provide crisis support or access to help and support during the school day if it's required. Last year, we appointed a senior counsellor, Tracy. Her role is to work across schools and coordinate the work that goes on in the schools, and to help share best practice. And Tracy also works herself in a school, and she's going to talk a little bit about what that work looks like. Thanks, Tracy.
Hi, so my name's Tracy Jackson, and as Kay previously said, I was appointed last year as senior counsellor for the counselling over the schools that we currently work with in Herefordshire, and that's currently 6 schools that we are supporting with either 1 or 2 counsellors in the school. So what I thought would be quite good today would be to give you an idea of the day in the life of a school counsellor, and I'm basing this upon myself of working in the Bishop of Hereford's Blue Coat School, who've agreed to let me say that. So really just to give you an idea of what it looked like and the organisation around that day. So as you can see on the slide, it's preparation, so organising the appointments, and there's 5 normally in one day, and fitting the timings around the school day, so fitting in with the lessons and break times and the children's lunch time, which is important. You know, the school is well organised and fit around this well. So communication, and having that communication with the pastoral team. They've got a good team of support there. So liaising with them each week to actually find out the children, the referrals, who needs their, you know, who's there for counselling, and making arrangements for their appointments and making sure that they're available. It's communicated to them, they know where they're coming, and that's all part of the counselling, of them having it in school. It's available, it feels comfortable for most children having spoken to them. They don't have to go out of school, so they can come out of their class and go straight to their counselling session, and this is proved to be beneficial. That the liaison with the mentors and the deputy head and the safeguarding again is paramount. If there's something in school that's happening, that there's a trend that we're noticing in groups of children, young people, how can we help with that? So we also provide that support to mentors of maybe suggestions and offers of our training from the CLD Trust as well, of what else what can we do to support the school. And then moving on, the liaison, you know, again, supporting the children, identifying the mental illnesses, do they need to be referred on to external agencies? And again, having that communication is key, and being in school is that we are there, we're available. If there's a crisis or something happens in school which can on a daily basis, we can be faced with anything. You go into school and you don't know what you're going to be faced with. And if there is that crisis and the children need somebody to be present and available, we have the drop-in sessions where I can be available for the student, for them to come in and express their concerns, and then possibly to escalate. Do they need a referral? Do they need a drop-in, just to check in and make sure that they're okay? The space is confidential, and the children like that, because I'm not a teacher, so I'm not going to be checking in on, have you done your own work, your school attendance. I'm here to purely support your needs, and they like that, which is really good feedback as well. The sessions last up to 50 minutes. They vary with the age of the student. You know, working with 11 to 16-year-olds, some of the younger ones, depending upon their presentation, maybe can only manage half an hour, 35 minutes, and sometimes too much. So we're flexible with that time as well, you know, 30 to 50 minutes. You know, in that time, something else may have happened in between that, you know, that time can be used to support or help another student. During COVID, we've still maintained our presence within the school, providing team support, telephone check-ins, and the children are currently coming into school and having those face-to-face sessions whilst following the COVID regulations and safeguards and rules around that. So, and that again has proved beneficial. The children are keen to come in and continue with their sessions. I think the flexibility of the service within school is key. You know, it's about being flexible. It's been about being supportive of, you know, being there, thinking on your feet, what do we need to do? And that's been important, adapting quickly, knowing when you need to communicate, the safeguarding, the process of the safeguarding that is in place for the school and for the CLD Trust. What do we need to do? And that's really helpful that, you know, they've got that. They know what we do, we know what they do, we know the process, and it works. It works quickly. There's no child that is left sort of without that safeguarding, that protection, that support in place. If something is highlighted, then we're there to address it. What we have done whilst this last lockdown has been put into place, we've also added to the school's website a contact form for the children to contact CLD Trust directly. So if they don't have chance and they don't get to speak to a mentor, then they can actually access it through the school website and send it directly to us, and we can inform the relevant school. And that's been attached to all the schools that all 6 schools that we work in within the area. And that's working already. You know, that's been put in place in the last couple of weeks, and we're getting responses through that, through either the students or the parents, which again is really helpful for the school to be able to support the students in the best way that they can. I think being in school is the place can be creative. You know, we can go outside. The school of children are safe in the school environment. So if a counsellor needs to go and walk around the grounds, they've got that space. Again, it supports and it helps the students to open up. You know, it's not that face-to-face, and it's all a bit intimidating, particularly for the younger ones and age 11. So, you know, that's proved to be very, very good. The monitoring of the sessions, the evaluation and feedback, again, as Kate said earlier, they're all monitored by ROM, so we're constantly monitoring their goals and their progress and what interventions may help, what else do we need to do. So we're always thinking with the children, you know, at the heart of it all. I think as well, whilst the lockdown started last March, I think there's been a bigger communication to the parents as well, helping parents support the children. What else can they do? And that's been a big part, particularly of my work within Bishops. And I know from conversations with the other school counsellors, they've had the same input as well. And we're always available to offer that advice or signposting to what parents may need. I think being visible within the school, of the children knowing you, you know, we know you, or, you know, there's Tracy, or there's Alison, or there's Sarah within the school, and they're able to actually pop their head round the door and say, I'm doing okay now, I'm still doing okay, you know, and that's really positive, that they feel comfortable, they're confident, they're trusting in you being there and knowing that you're there, which for me is a big part of getting that feedback and that reward. And I think I'm speaking as well for all the other school counsellors. who go through exactly the same process through the day. So that's part of my school day, being visible, knowing that I'm there. You know, it may be a teacher who sees you in the corridor who say, oh, I could just do with a minute, or I've just noticed this, could I, you know, so it's about being visible. I would stay after the school day to wrap up the day of completing any paperwork, but being there for anybody, the teachers or the head, or to cover any safeguarding again that needs to be escalated, or referrals on, or signposting to CAN. So there is always that at the end of the day. And I feel that the process that we've adopted within all our schools works. It works really well. Some of the schools have asked for extra sessions to support the waiting lists. You know, they're growing waiting lists, and that again has proved successful for reducing the waiting list, but also more importantly supporting the young people at a time when it's been critical. Many comments have been fed back from the schools to say that our support within the schools has been critical for the children in helping them to continue with their studies. You know, and I think that has been so valuable to them and for us as counsellors to actually say, you know, we're helping children in and outside of school to continue with their education and supporting their mental health. So I think, you know, listening to that feedback and realising that, you know, we are professionals, we are there, and we are there to help and support. So, yeah, and we've got some feedback from several of the schools that we work in, which I've placed up on the screen. I've been given permission by them all to put their names to them. Don't know, can you see them clear enough? Yeah. Can you see those? Yeah, can you see those clear enough?
People want to take a minute to have a quick read.
Yeah. And I think sort of as you're reading through those, we are constantly assessing the needs, you know, always mental health leads in the school to say, is there anything else you need? Do your staff need support? Is there any training? You know, we've got children currently that I'm working with, and I know Alison's working with. They're taking part in the participation of their artwork, and they're going to be presenting that, and that's going to be they're going to see that in Hereford. They're excited because it's been part of their therapy, and it's great that we can tie all that in as well and help support that. You know, the children are thinking, well, can I do it in my therapy, or do I take it home, and why have I picked this picture, and why have I done that? And it's all been part of their own journey, whether it's been anxiety, stress, whether it's been more severe mental health issues, which we are finding coming through. There's that combination of self-harm and eating disorders, which have become more apparent during lockdown. So there's all aspects of it, and they, you know, from the anxiety to the more extreme where children need more intervention. So there's a wide range that we're now seeing more visible within the school. Okay. I just want to have a quick read through that. Well, not quick, but absorb it. And our counselling team within the schools and within the trust, we're all very flexible with a vast amount of experience in different areas and arenas. Yeah, we're a great bunch, very adaptable. Just final one. So that's the day of life as a school counsellor. So it's always busy, it's always different. No 2 days are the same, which makes the job really interesting and varied. Challenging, but obviously that comes then with the rewards after that. So yeah.
Thank you, Tracy. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Kay or Alex, before we open it up to questions? Hang on, Alex. I think Kay, I think you're on mute.
Mute, okay. Just to say, I think we did touch on it, but may have not made it completely clear. The first lockdown in March last year, we quickly brought forward plans that we were developing to offer a service via video conferencing. It was going to be an additional offer to children and young people. We did roll that out really quickly last year. That has become part of our offer, and some children and young people who are unable to come into the service for one reason or another at the moment are taking up that offer. However, the majority of children and young people have expressed a wish to continue to have a service in person, and they feel that's really important to be able to come in and sit with their professional and discuss their needs in a confidential way. So it is an important part of our service, the remote service. It is offered, but the most popular service, still by a huge stretch, is actually coming in and sitting with someone in person. Did you want to say anything, Alex?
Yeah, I was just going to flag up just one of the things that Kay said really early up in the presentation about the whole school approach to mental health, because that's obviously going to be a crucial element, I think, isn't it, moving forward in terms of what young people have been experiencing. So whether it's an involvement, supporting them with an involvement in participation with strong young minds at that sort of level, or whether it's the support of staff, well, I think you know, what the CLD can do to support schools in that is going to be quite vital moving forward. So it's worth considering, I think, how you as a school are able to do that currently, and whether you need any help to be able to put something more holistic in place.
Thanks, Alex. So if I just see if we can stop sharing the screen. Can you do it from your end, Tracy? And then the panelists will pop back up so everyone can see clearly. That's it. So we've got a couple of questions lined up in the Q&A box, which I'll come to each of you in turn and ask you to come on live and read out your question. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask Richard Kelly if you had any thoughts on what we've heard today. If you've got any questions.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, guys. That was very interesting. And you referred to the fact that you've obviously developed a technological online offering as a response to the current situation. And I have heard independently that, of course, surprisingly enough, our kids don't particularly want to do it via Zoom. They want to do it face to face, which is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I just wondered what your experience of the lockdown and the disruption to schools in the last 12 months had been, and whether or not you had seen a big increase in issues, and if the types of issues you were seeing had changed in any way over that period.
So shall I start and then let my colleagues add to it? So initially, if we go back to March last year, initially in the first couple of months, we did see a slowdown in the number of referrals, and I think that reflected the inability of children and young people to get to see their GP, and that's where the majority of our referrals come from. So we rolled out our remote offer, but through the next 2 lockdowns, we have been open. So we do recognise the increased vulnerability of children and young people during the lockdown. So in those families where the family is strong, relationships are good, then it has been and can be for some children and young people quite a positive experience, or they're probably wearing a bit thin for parents educating at home now. But in families where there's any strain, or the relationships in families weren't good previously, those have only been amplified and exacerbated by lockdown. So we do know that some young children and young people are in increasingly vulnerable situations, and I think, you know, we're all aware of that from the national news. So what we have done is we have made alternative ways available for young people to be able to refer into our service. So we now have self-referral forms, not only on the Strong Young Minds website, they're on our main CLD Trust website. We're taking referrals not only from health professionals and obviously the schools with whom we have contracts, but from parents, other professionals and children and young people directly, so that we are doing our best to make sure that our service is out and available. And as I said earlier, we've also increased our social media presence so that we are trying to use that as a vehicle for enabling children and young people to signpost themselves into service. We anticipate that we will continue to see an increase in referrals post-lockdown. And we've already been having discussions with partners locally about the types of response that might be needed once lockdown finishes and we start looking at the needs across the county, which I think are going to be considerable.
Thanks, Kay. That's really useful to hear that. And on that note, that links to a question Felicity Norman has raised. So I'm going to click on Felicity and ask her to ask her question. She says, on the right screen. Felicity, are you able to speak and ask your question?
I hope so. Have I pushed the right button? Yes?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. That was really interesting, really enlightening to hear what you're all doing. Thank you. Sounds tremendous. We're hearing about a service which I think CCG have got funding for, which is bringing health and mental health support into schools. I don't know quite how far it's got. I gather the idea is for all schools in Hereford and I think Worcester as well to have this support. But I just wondered how you'll fit with it. I'm sure you'll fit very well, but you know, it's presumably you're not in all schools anyway. Is that right, or are you? And yes, will they be doing something different to you? Will it be complementary? Yeah, just how it's going to work. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know a huge amount about the programme. What I do know is that that people are being trained to work in schools. I think there are 4 people who are being trained to work with children and young people who have anxiety, low mood, some conduct work. Those people are also being trained to assist schools with a whole school approach. As far as I understand at the moment, I can only see that work complementing the work we're doing in those schools who contracted with us directly too. So as you saw from the range of presentations that we see, there are many more presentations than anxiety, low mood and conduct. So I would see our counsellors being present in schools, really just enhancing that approach to what's taking place in the school. It's early days. Those people are currently in their training, those 4 people. There are some host schools, as I understand, that have already been chosen, and then that resource will be shared out across the county. So early days, but I expect the work that we do at the CLD Trust to be complementary to that work rather than it being a replacement for what we do.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yes, I think you've made it clear they are really picking up, if you like, fairly low level, very concerning, but low level
Yes.
issues sort of before they become developed, I suppose. And what you're doing is often much more complex than that.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm sure you'll complement them, and hopefully the 2 things will work well together. Thank you.
Thanks, Felicity.
I'd just like to add to that, Christine.
Okay.
That program has been delayed. The NHS staff have been trained, but of course, most of the teachers in our schools who will need to host those workers and work with them are slightly busy at the moment, and therefore they've not been able to be deployed into schools. Even when they are, I think it'll be at least another year before we see any impact of that program. And if we are to believe that there's a big increase in mental health problems in younger people, then really as much resource as we can get in the county in our schools, whether it comes from CLD, the NHS or elsewhere, is all to the good. So I'm pleased about that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that extra bit.
So on the note of talking about the extra NHS services that are going to come in, another question that Ian Stead has asked is how you're working with the other mental health providers in terms of CAMS at the Worcester Health, sorry, get it right, Herefordshire and Worcestershire Health and Care Trust, easy for me to say. So how does your service, I mean, I know the answer, but I just think for the audience is sort of explaining a little bit about the boundary between your service and the CAMS, Children and Adolescent Mental Health Service that the NHS provide.
Okay, so we work very closely with the CAMS service, as you might expect, and we actually refer children and young people into their service. CAMS are also, I think, they refer the majority of our NHS referrals into our service, so they're a big referrer into our service. I guess the easiest way to explain it is that we provide a tier 2 service, so we're working with that range of presentations that we've seen. Once something becomes a slightly more advanced or problematic situation, that becomes then a CAMS service referral. So the easiest way to illustrate that, I guess, is with an eating difficulty and disorder. So if something is an eating difficulty and a young person's starting to experience some low-level difficulties with eating, amongst other issues, we would see that person in service. Once that becomes more complex and becomes a disorder, then that's a service that needs to be delivered by a CAMS specialist eating disorders team. It's kind of that level. So we're working with similar presentations, but once they become significantly more acute, then we would be referring over to CAMS.
And I assume similarly, some young people may step down into your service from CAMS.
Yes, some young people come into our service from CAMS. Some young people will be referred direct to CAMS and not get a service, but CAMS will refer them into our service. So there is a very great deal of close working relationships. We don't normally work with anyone who is also receiving a CAMS service at the same time. Occasionally we might, if we've been asked by a psychiatrist or a psychologist to continue providing a particular type of therapy which is complementary to whatever service they're getting in CAMS, but that's quite unusual. There are not many of those cases. It's usually an either or, they're either in the CAMS service or they're with our service.
Thanks. So I'm going to bring Hilary Walmsley in. She's got a question about family support. Hilary, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, yes, thank you. I just wasn't sure if I misheard or misunderstood something at the very beginning of the presentation, a reference to supporting families as opposed to individuals. Did I hear something or misunderstand something around that?
No, you didn't. We do have a systemic family practitioner, and we're hoping to support another person to train in systemic family next year. We do offer that as a service. However, at the moment, whilst we've been under COVID restrictions, we have not been offering that service because it requires, as you might imagine, the whole family to be present with the therapist.
Okay.
If we look at our COVID safety requirements in the office to keep that 2 metre distance and to make sure that we are COVID secure, that becomes a little bit prohibitive if we're talking about having 2, 3, 4 family members in the room with the therapist. So at the moment we've suspended that service. Having said that, I have today been having a conversation with one of our quality and professional practice managers, and we are going to try working with 1 or 2 families remotely just to see whether it's feasible, whether it is something that can be delivered. So
if we, for instance, we had a family where they're struggling with a primary age child's behaviours, often it is around anger. They don't want an early help assessment because they think that's going to involve social workers. They wouldn't meet the criteria for referral into CAM. Is that the kind of situation where you might be able to help?
There are 2 kinds of support that we might offer with families. So with a younger child, we might offer some low intensity CBT. So if, for example, it's as you describe and it's some issues around conduct or anger, we might work with the parents in a parent-led way, developing a CBT intervention. Systemic family practice is slightly different. That's looking at where there are complex issues and intergenerational issues within families that need to be kind of unravelled and unpicked to look at what's having an impact on that particular child. But certainly for things like, as you've mentioned, conduct and anger and other issues that might be facing slightly younger children, then a parent-led session using low-intensity CBT is something that we do offer. And have been offering for the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
So we might be able to squeeze in 1 or 2 more questions. The next person is Carl May. So I'm just going to find him on the list and bring him in. His point related to one of the slides where you talk about working with outside partners. I'm just trying to find him on the list. There he is. Carl, would you like to ask your question and perhaps say who you are and what outside partner you represent?
Yeah, I certainly would. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to have a chat with you again. I'm a life coach and NLP practitioner, and more so now my clients are getting younger and younger, coming to me from very distressed parents, feeling sort of left alone. That's why they're coming to me privately. So the question was really, do you have an increased need for external support with somebody such as myself? Because I would love to throw my hat into the pot and see if I can help this massive burden that we're all seeing at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. I mean, we tend to work more closely with partners that are non-traditional partners through our Strong Your Minds programme. And we have utilised various different types of support for some of those people who have been supported through Strong Young Minds. I wouldn't say no at all to any other organisations that might be able to offer either a step up or step down approach that will help in the overall emotional and mental health and well-being of an individual. So yeah, I think actually we may have spoken by email a few months ago. Carl, is that right?
Yes, I think we touched base, but I think COVID stepped in and I think everything just went a bit crazy.
Yeah, I mean, do get back in touch. I'm very happy to have a discussion with you about what might be possible.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Unmute. Chris Baird is on the call and he's made a comment. I wondered if Chris wanted to come on and mention his comment live about the early help service. Chris, can you?
Yeah, thank you. Very happy to, and thank you everyone for the presentation, the information, and the work that's being carried out. It's really great to see. I was just making the point about early help assessments, that they are really, you know, they're not a council thing, are they? They're something that all sorts of different organisations and colleagues undertake. Colleagues in CLD are nodding vigorously on the screen, aren't they? But you know, health visitors, schools, early years settings take a lead in early help assessments. The vast majority of them aren't actually carried out by council employees, and it really is about working with the family, the parents and carers and the children, building on their strengths and seeing how, you know, preventative services, early help services can be coordinated. So yeah, it doesn't involve social care. I think social care can do some great work with families as well, but it's just, yeah, it'd be great to just emphasise that point with families that colleagues are working with, so that they do benefit from that approach. So thank you for the opportunity just to say that.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, it might be worth
Chris.
considering how we get that message across, that if there is some reluctance for people to come forward that might benefit from early help assessments, that they're not put off in any way.
Yeah, absolutely, Christine. Yeah, thanks.
I think that's one of the points, Christine, Chris, of this forum. It's about exchanging ideas. It's about making information available about a whole range of things that impact children and young persons' well-being in the widest sense. And I know next time round we've got school nurses and other people, because it is multidisciplinary. And it is right across the spectrum of how people interact with younger people and have those opportunities, and they will arrive in all sorts of different ways. And some of the presentations we've had in the past have been about the most unusual people becoming the champions that actually generate that change in behaviour that give kids better resilience, whether it's the scouts or a family member or even the police on occasion. So I think that's a point well made, and something I wouldn't want to lose in this forum. It is not about therapeutic services only. It is about the wider sense of bringing up kids to be resilient and challenging citizens in our society to cope with a world that's gone completely bloody mad. Pardon me for swearing. And you know, anything that's there to do that is absolutely great. So I'm pleased about that. Sorry, Christine.
Yeah, I was going to squeeze in one last question, but before I do that, just want to plug the next event. Will be towards the end of April. We need to fix the date, but as Richard mentioned, the school nursing team will be providing an overview of their service and what they're all about. And we've also got the eating disorder service coming to talk about their service and what they're doing. And sadly, they've seen an increase in referrals relating to eating disorders over COVID. So we can hear more about that, and perhaps an opportunity for people to find out more and ask them about any support they can be giving in school. So the last question is from Julie Milsom, and I'll get Julie to come on if I just find her. So many different screens I'm operating here. It's out of time. There she is. Yeah, Julie wanted to ask about mental health for people with a learning disability. Julie, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. Yes, it was a really informative presentation. Thank you. And I really just wanted to ask, are there any studies so far that you're aware of that's measuring the impact of the lockdown on young people with a learning difficulty? Because quite often they're already facing quite significant challenges in their sort of finding their place in the world, particularly if they're on something like the autistic spectrum, and then to have literally their world turned upside down overnight, you know, it must have had an enormous impact. And certainly with the people that we've seen, some of them are really struggling with trying to articulate how they feel, and also with their families being able to manage their situation. So I just wondered what sort of support is likely to be available, and that these people don't kind of get left behind. Thank you.
I don't know of any particular studies that are taking place, any particular research that's looking at children with learning difficulties and their particular experiences of COVID. We do get some young people with learning difficulties referred into service. I think probably it'd be fair to say that we had the last couple of years increasing numbers of young people with Asperger's or on the ASB spectrum. Tracy, would you like to say any more about whether you've seen an increase in children and people with learning difficulties?
Yeah, I think within school, I think, as you quite rightly said, the challenges for children who are possibly on the spectrum and with other learning disability, it has been challenging. I think adapting the learning, what I've noticed in school, they are adapting the learning, they're helping the children, bringing them in for half days to support that. I don't know of any other studies, but what I do know of what the schools are making available for children who are particularly struggling in different areas. And I think along with that, there's their anxieties as well. So, you know, the more children that have become, after the first lockdown, were more fearful then of coming back in, and they're maybe they're not kept up with their studying. So we've noticed more around that area, that children have not wanted to come back to school because they felt that they've been left behind. And I know there's been a lot put in place to support children, to not to worry about where you are, but the fact that you're doing a little bit, and that's what matters in the circumstances in life as it is now. You're continuing to move forward, taking those little steps. So that's my experience within school. But I've not heard of any studies, as Kay already said. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Tracy. There has been a report during COVID from the National Autistic Society, who've gathered some information about people with autism through COVID, and how COVID's been affecting them. And I can pick that out and include it with the summary of today's event and the slides for anybody who wants to see it.
Thank you.
We have evidence in there of how more impacted these people have been than some of the rest of us. So it is quite stark reading. So I'll make sure we share that.
Can I just jump in quickly as well, Christine? Just a little thing that a couple of counsellors have mentioned, and it is only a couple of counsellors. While we said that a lot of young people really didn't want to go online to get counselling, they really wanted that connection of being in the room with somebody and were prepared to wait for that. A couple of counsellors mentioned early on in the beginning of lockdown, I don't know whether that's something that Tracy's found as well, is that there have been a couple of clients who actually benefited from getting counselling remotely because they didn't have to have the pressure of coming in and sitting with somebody. So that might be something that comes out of those studies, is that those different methods, which we still have, we're continuing to do that for those young people who need it. That might be something to look at in the future. I don't know if that's something that Tracy agrees with from her experience.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I mean,
can I just say, I mean, I think we already know that children who have any kind of physical or learning disability are at increased risk for mental health and well-being. So it only goes, you know, we can obviously extrapolate that if you add COVID onto the top of that, there are going to be a significant numbers of young people who have needs, who have also got some kind of learning disability or indeed physical disability. I think that need is just going to be amplified across the young person's population as we look at what's coming out of COVID. You know, we're already talking, we had a meeting last week, and one of the questions that was asked was, have we seen any impact of children and young people who maybe have long COVID, of children and young people who are maybe have had COVID in the family and are too frightened to go out or start engaging with people. So there are going to be lots of different scenarios, aren't there, we're going to be facing as we come out of this lockdown and start working again and receiving referrals for children and people.
That's interesting, Kay, and I think one of the things Healthwatch will be keen to work with the Schools Forum on is to hear all about that range of different scenarios and how it has been affecting people and continues to affect people. And we'd welcome as much feedback about that as possible. So I'm going to close questions now because we're slightly over time. And I'm going to say thanks very much and hand over to Richard to just sum up and say final words.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to CLD for turning up and giving us such an interesting talk at this difficult time. I'd also like to thank all the participants. I know you've probably all had a long day sitting at your screens wondering if the kids are at the other end. So thank you for joining us. And to say to people on the front line, if you've got questions, if you've got stuff you want to tell us or ask us, you know where we are. We'd love to hear from you and shape this. If there's one thing I'd want to emphasize from today, it was mentioned by CLD in passing, but I think it's quite a big thing. In the past, to see and access CLD's therapeutic service, it's necessary to have a referral via a GP. They are now taking referrals direct from individuals, direct from families, and from children and young people themselves. I think that's hugely important because it means if you come across people that you think are struggling and you think they need some kind of therapeutic intervention, you can talk to them and suggest that they can make their own referral to get help. So please bear that in mind. It's a big change, and I think it's an important change at this difficult time. So thank you, everybody. We're back in April with CAMS and the School Nursing Service. CAMS will be talking about their eating disorder service. Worryingly, just so you're aware, I heard last week from CAMS that their number of referrals from young people for eating disorders has risen from 2 to 8 a week. And I think that's horrific. It fills me with dread because if you have experience of eating disorders, it's one of the hardest things to crack and sometimes affects people's lives forever. So please join us. Thank you for joining tonight and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.